Dom and Johnny in the morning. All right, so today we're diving into an interesting side of the martial arts. So to start off, when we were trained as instructors, there were 3 topics we were told to never really talk about because it could only be inflammatory, and that was sex, politics, and religion. So that being said, last week I had a student come up to me and very point blank ask an interesting question, which is, and I believe I'm getting the phrasing right on this, which is why I thought it was interesting was how it was phrased. It was, how much of our teaching method is inspired by or incorporates Eastern religion? And I thought it would be an interesting thing to discuss because even though we don't really talk about religion for the sake of transparency, I feel like we can at least talk about the fact that the Shaolin Monastery is a monastery. So it's a fair question to ask when, you're hearing words like monk, temple, and monastery thrown around in the history of the art.
I mean, Bodhidharma, didn't just bring, ancient yoga practices. He brought Chan Buddhism with him to the Shaolin Monastery.
And what is Chan Buddhism?
This is where my knowledge isn't the best. To my knowledge, originally, Buddhism there were no deities. There was no worship. It was principles and philosophies that would allow you to pretty much transcend ordinary human life and just be enlightened. Being able to shed away all of those human desires. So, but as far as Chan Buddhism goes, I think that is the extent of my knowledge. I'm definitely limited.
Yeah, and that is a good thing to just acknowledge, is that neither of us are religious scholars. Mm-hmm. This is what we know based on Wikipedia and other similarly accessible resources. So, we're not exactly authorities on this, but I think, if anything, that goes to show the fact that a lot of what and how we teach is not, I've never thought of it as religious. I've always framed a lot of these concepts as either symbolic or philosophical, with the difference being that if you look up the definition of religion is worship or faith, usually toward a higher power or a deity. And there are martial arts that outright integrate some sort of worship or prayer in their practices. So Kaju Kempo, which we've talked about before, there is a Kaju Kempo prayer.
There is a Kaju Kempo prayer.
And that's how they begin and end? I know at least begin all of their training.
Traditionally they did. And I was, not too long ago, I was watching the master of the pit, the guy who owns the pit, Hackelman.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about how he's not religious, and I don't even think his students were at the time, but they really liked the Kaju Kempo prayer.
Yeah.
Just because of its historical, or paying homage to its, historical nature in the Kaju Kempo system.
Yeah.
So they requested that they start doing the prayer at the beginning and end of class. And this is after years of him not doing it. And he's not religious at all. But the prayer is very religious.
Right.
And that comes from, in Hawaii back then, everyone that started Kaju Kempo, the 5 main founders, were all deeply religious people. Christianity. Mitosi, who was the one who brought Kempo to America, he was a deeply religious guy too. But I think this is the interesting thing, and I think this kind of, if anything, how I feel about the martial arts. When he was studying at home, he was deeply involved in Buddhism, and he believed that it could not be separated from the art. And when he moved to Hawaii and started teaching in Hawaii, he immediately flipped religions and went to Christianity. And he believed that it could not be separated from the art. And his reasoning was it had nothing to do with the religion. He just believed that the martial arts are very are supposed to be mind, body, and spirit. And the spirit side was kind of a deeply personal thing. So it didn't matter if he was a Buddhist or a Christian. What mattered is that he was spiritual. And I think that's a cool thing to note, especially for people who are worried, especially if they have a religion and they feel like doing the martial arts might contradict their religion. I would just remind you that religion, or at least our roots back to Hawaii, would say that, it's about being spiritual. It's not about having a specific religion.
Also, just to establish where we're at, at the beginning and end of every class, there is an opening and closing meditation. I don't see it as a religious meditation. There may be, and most likely are, traces back to, again, Chan Buddhism, in the sense that the word Chan means meditation. So, the story we tell...
I didn't know that, actually. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, that's what Wikipedia said.
Oh.
And it's usually pretty... But, when we do outreach and stuff and we explain the roots of the Shaolin Temple, we talk about Bodhidharma and basically the fact that when he came across the temple originally, the monks were very physically unwell because they were so focused on the spiritual side, they were neglecting the body. And they would try to meditate and fall asleep. So Bodhidharma, as the legend goes, brought balance by incorporating physical movements of the 5 animals, which is how they were able to strengthen their bodies and thus strengthen their mind and spirit so they could meditate longer. Our angle is physical benefit. So one of our great dear friends, Dr. Terry New, who was a special educations specialist at Sacred Heart University, also taught Tai Chi at our school for years and years. And he basically acknowledged the fact that if the spiritual visual helps you, that will connect to the physical benefits. If you want to mostly focus on the physical benefits, it'll help you with clarity of mind. Ultimately, the physical benefits of deep breathing and Tai Chi are greater blood circulation and calming the nervous system. So just even deep diaphragmatic breathing for about 30 seconds rebalances cortisol levels. It calms your sympathetic nervous system, which leads to greater clarity of thought and all this stuff. So we do these things because there is a physical benefit, even if you go far enough back, there's some sort of spiritual reasoning behind why the techniques were developed. But that doesn't mean that we're trying to push some sort of spiritual agenda. Again, like you said, the martial arts are a very personal thing. And the other part is, a lot of times if you look up Buddhism or Taoism, Taoism in particular, it comes up as both a philosophy and a religion, with the distinction being that religion has more to do with worship, and for lack of a better term, I feel like a cosmological view, where you're seeing how like greater powers are bringing things into existence. Philosophy is more of an academic study, so it's not so much about the faith that one might have. It has more to do with just observing how things are and helping resolve moral dilemmas. And a lot of times we will use language or symbolism that happens to be used in religious contexts sometimes because it greater highlights a philosophical point we're trying to make. Really good Christian example. Thou shalt not kill. Just because I'm not murdering anyone doesn't mean I'm a Christian, like necessarily. Sometimes that's just a good thing to do, but that doesn't mean that just because it is very specifically Christian that it's something that we, like, if you don't identify as a Christian, you should ignore, So in the same way, like, I think of terms like yin and yang. Yin and yang is, I think, brought up in Taoism, and really when we speak to it martial arts wise, we're often speaking of the action of a movement. So for example, if I throw a basketball at the ground, that the throwing is the yang part of the movement, the bouncing back up to my hand is the yin. It is a convenient metaphor to help someone visualize with their mind so they can access some part of their body. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that we're like pushing some sort of religious agenda.
Yeah, and you know, times, even if you go to the Shaolin Temple now, at least from my understanding, from the people I've listened to, you know, many of the warrior monks are not Buddhist monks.
Yeah.
You know, there are the Buddhist monks, you know, and then there are the warrior monks, and they're separate. And some of the warrior monks are Buddhist, but some are not.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But from my understanding, that's okay. And you know, kneeling at the end of class is, when we say, commonly heard that we are not here to serve the art is here to serve you. You know, that meditation period at the end is kind of whatever you need it to be. You know, like John was saying, you know, it's designed to help you kind of turn down after a class and go over everything that you've gone over in class. And, you know, that can mean different things to different people. You know, if you are religious and you take that time to say a quick prayer, I think there's nothing wrong with that. If you're not religious and you use that time to just focus on your breathing and maybe try and think of nothing, which is very hard to do, but is very, very beneficial, I think that's great. If you're using that time to go over in your head all the movements that you've learned, also very beneficial. They say that, you know, going over movements in your head can actually help you do the movements physically. Your body has a very similar reaction to when you're actually physically doing the movement to when you're going over it in your head in detail. So I think that meditation period, you know, can really be what you want it to be, you know. And then I have a feeling we're probably going to go into the bows at some point. I'm sure people have.
Oh, yeah, we can do that now.
Yeah.
I mean, so there is a lot of different ways you can look at the significance of a bow. For our school's purposes, a bow is an acknowledgement of gratitude to whatever we're bowing to. It's as simple as that. So in usual classes, we do a lot less bows than most martial arts schools. We bow to the people who are physically present, or have directly led to our ability to train, in the sense that like right now that day. So, you know, usually the instructors and students bow to each other, students acknowledging the fact that without teachers, they wouldn't have new things to learn and practice. Without students, teachers wouldn't have the privilege of being teachers. And we just also bow to the families that are in the lobby. Unless a family member is like getting stuck at the grocery store and they're late or something, I tell them just to think about their parent as they're doing their bow, mostly as gratitude for the fact that, again, without parents to bring them, they wouldn't be able to train, you know? And also, in formal settings, we'll also bow to Great Grandmaster Fred Villari, because of his contributions as the founder. And we'll also bow to the flag. It's interesting. That one is more and more, you know, I said before, we don't really talk about politics. That one has generated a lot of conversation between instructors and students, you know, due to personal beliefs or affiliations or whatever. To be honest, I still bow to the flag all the time because my mom really likes it. She's like, there are certain ideals that she holds philosophically that she believes it's what the country could be, that she's really paying gratitude toward. Like the meditation thing you mentioned, it's a very personal thing. And
I think there's I think there is a historical part in that too. You know, showing I don't even want to say allegiance, but you know, honoring the flag of your country is something that you see in most other countries too. Because when it comes down to it, we teach, you know, our roots come from Japan and our roots come from China. But if you really file it down, this is an American martial art. And most Kempo in America consider themselves to be an American martial art. So, because they originated in Hawaii. Whether they were sprinkled with, you know, more authentic Shaolin like we were, or whether they were, a kind of moved more in a analytical direction like American Kempo, or if they just kept developing the Kaju Kempo side of it. It is an American martial art. You don't see these very hodgepodge mixed styles as much in Japan. They're very, very traditional. So there is something to be said about we're not just honoring the flag of America because we live in America. We're honoring it because this is, technically speaking, an American martial art, and it was created in America. So it's pretty interesting to think about. And if you look at the gis in Japan, especially those competing in like Olympic sports, they'll always have the Japanese flag on their uniform, and even the Brazilian martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they'll commonly have a Brazilian flag on their uniform. It's starting to get away from it now.
Yeah.
But especially the original uniforms, if you looked at some of the older, Gracie uniforms, they always had the Brazilian flag on there. And then some of them would have Brazil on one shoulder and America on the other. But yeah, it's very interesting. But that's kind of like a pastime in the martial arts, I think.
Yeah, well, and just one other point that came to mind as you were speaking. We have a lot of students and teachers that have served. And I think that acknowledging their service, I think it's more beneficial to bow to the flag as an acknowledgement of the service of people who are actually involved in our school than it would be to not. It just came to mind. That was something I hadn't even really thought about. Now, that being said, I do want to acknowledge that we do stuff and we do it for a certain reason. That doesn't mean other people don't do the same thing and think of it like differently. So I've had students before tell me that they were uncomfortable bowing because to them it was a symbol of subjugation. I've also had gone through Qigong seminars and stuff where the lead instructor is, saying that the bow is symbolism of, the crown of the head chakra opening up to the energies of the universe so that way you can allow energy in. And for a lot of people, they find that helpful. For a lot of people, they find that spiritual or religious. For some people, like myself, I see it as a great way to align the spine, which is just healthy for my body to begin with. So, again, the visualization can sometimes help the body part. I just want to be transparent about how a lot of these same things can be used so that students can judge their own comfort level as it relates to their own beliefs. So if I have a student who, for some reason, that feels super uncomfortable, they don't have to do that seminar, but I want to be transparent about what the content would be so that they don't feel like the rug is pulled out from under them.
Yeah, and I think it makes it a little bit easier because, even in Japan, so their bow to show humility to each other, which is, much like our handshake, is a full bow where you are looking down at the floor.
Yep.
And, exposing the top of your head essentially to, the person. I think that would be much, much harder to defend to someone who doesn't want to bow to something than the way we bow, where we keep the eyes up.
Yeah.
Because we're not actually bowing our heads, which is typically if you're going into religion, the bowing of your head, I think that is where the worship bowing would be.
Yeah.
Kind of, but we keep our eyes up and we look, and in all honesty, my bow at this point is a slight bend at the waist and a little flex of my front position.
Yeah.
And I think that's all you need. So I understand if it does make people uncomfortable, but if you really think about it, we're not full bowing. We're not bowing. We're not showing. We're not giving that humility to. We're not worshiping. The great God Fred Volari.
Right.
Yeah. But I could understand how someone would find that weird.
Yeah.
To bow towards someone. But Eastern culture is different.
Yeah. Well, and part of this too, when you're asking or when someone is asking how much of this is religious or tied to religion, I think it is important to note that culturally there are a lot of things that are different, that also sometimes suffer from simple mistranslation. So, like, when you look up Taoism and Wikipedia says that it's a religion and a philosophy, you know, is it a religion because religion is just the closest word we have to describe what the take is versus how we think of other things like Judaism or Christianity or something. So a good example I can think of is one you brought up, which is the word qi. Qi in Chinese really just means energy. And oftentimes it gets misconstrued by Western minds to think like Dragon Ball Z energy blasts.
Yes.
When really, like, when you're talking about cultivating chi, it's not necessarily cultivating some mystical supernatural energy. Sometimes it is just blood flow. Really interesting discovery you made or thing you learned, you know. On some Shaolin Kempo Karate posters, it'll list the curriculum, like a syllabus, and it's like, you learn the blood palm, and I've always wondered what the blood palm was, because it sounds cool. And, you know, from my understanding, it has to do with the blood flow to the palm to create more weight so you can hit harder. It's not like, you know, it's not some Tarantino movie where, like, you hit the person 5 times and you hit them in the chest and, you know, they explode into blood. Like, and it's nothing.
My dreams were shattered.
Yeah, supernatural or anything. It's just, it is a neat visualization to convey a principle. And so a lot of times I feel like there's a little bit of misalignment when it comes to, is this some sort of supernatural belief, or is it a striking visual metaphor to help your body learn something?
Yeah, and that's the hard part, because in parts of China, both Buddhism and Taoism have migrated towards the religious side, where they've actually started to assign deities and worship. So it really depends on what side of that coin. But, you know, things like Master Ken used to talk about the Eightfold Path. Eightfold Path is just a great set of principles, great way to live your life, you know, regardless of what religion you are, or if you're not religious at all. You know, it has nothing, I mean, if you really think about it, and it all starts with right. And if I had to say it off the top of my head.
I got it.
Right.
So it's also usually as an 8-spoke wheel. So you've got right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, or meditation. So, yeah. But the idea, like you said, is that it's just right intention is, do your intentions match your actions? So I don't think you have to be Buddhist to just pay attention to your intentions.
No.
Or, you know, right effort. We talk about that a lot in a martial arts context, because sometimes a student will try so hard that they end up making a lot of, like, errors, like they tighten their shoulder, or lock out their elbow trying to get power, because they're just trying instead of putting the right effort with the right place, you know? So, like you said, the Eightfold Path is something we sometimes talk about with teacher training, but it is not in a religious context. Nope. It is in a very functional academic context. So yeah, do we have anywhere else to go with this one?
I don't think so.
No.
No, I think the big key is, you know, the mind, body, and spirit integration is great.
Yep.
Spirit part does not have to be religious. It can be.
Yeah.
But it's personal, you know, and spiritualness can ascend far beyond just religion, you know, just your inner spirit itself, you know, even things like, you know, when you amp up yourself and let out a good ki, you know, a spirit shout, you know, that is spirit, that is, you know, deep inside you. So, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, a religious thing. And if you always think of the martial arts being a personal experience, and if you always remember that the martial arts are a tool for you, you're not here to serve the martial arts, then I feel like you'll always feel comfortable in the martial arts.
Dom and Johnny in the morning.